I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Juan, would you please?
Sure. Dear Heavenly Father, we just come to you and just give you thanks for each and every one in Civil Air Patrol. Help us through these times, help our leadership to make wise decisions, just be with our troops as they're out there, be with their families, we pray, and be with us tonight. Amen.
Thank you, Juan. Amen. So tonight is Aerospace Education Night. We have XBN here. Not too many people probably have seen him. Not too many people here. You guys are pretty much new guys, you know. But you know, he's our Aerospace Education Officer. He's also, I think, the mayor of Moreno Valley, right? Mm-hmm. So thank you very much for coming down and preparing something for our people. How many people we have online, do you know? We have 2? Okay. So that gives us some. Oh, thank you. So to give us, before we let XBN start, Lon, you want to give everybody an update on the airplane, what you know?
So National has decided to overhaul our engine
Great.
rather than replace the cylinders, and so now there's a crate that's been sent, and they're gonna take the engine out of our plane in the next soon days, put it and send it to the shop, and they're gonna overhaul it, and then we'll get it back. So maybe 6 weeks from now we'll be flying the plane again.
We'll be flying almost a new plane. It'd be nice to have a new engine. I hope we get to break it in correctly this time. And it flies for many, many hours, so.
Yeah, we'll have to have some good discussion on the break-in
Yeah.
process and monitor the oil consumption, of course.
Right. So I don't know if anybody introduced Christopher Younger here, but Christopher Younger, he's my new professional development officer.
I was in Cleveland that week.
I don't know if he stood up and introduced himself, but I've been sick for a couple of weeks, and sorry about that, so.
Well, hey everyone, I'm Chris Younger.
Hey.
So that's Chris Younger right there, and if you have anything to do with professional development, you're going from one level to the other, Chris can help you there. And you have credentials now to sign people off. You should be able to sign people off for certain level stuff. If you can't
I
do
think
it.
it still goes to you for the final, but I can
Yeah,
sign it.
yeah, but you should see people on your console when they pop up, so.
Yes, I do.
If you don't, we'll have to re-promote you, so.
Yeah.
Not too many things going on. I think next week, if we can get together, I think next week is supposed to be a Nighthawk, isn't it?
5th Tuesday?
Is it a 5th Tuesday next week?
I don't know.
No, Tuesday's the 1st.
Wah.
I don't think so.
Oh.
You missed it by that much.
What happened?
Fine.
Wednesday's the 1st.
Oh, that's
My
right.
wife is
Okay,
leaving
so,
the
No,
1st.
Tuesday's the 1st,
okay.
Huh?
so we missed it.
So it's
Yeah.
March has the Nighthawk, okay.
Yeah. Tuesdays.
We missed it because it was last week or a couple weeks ago. But I'd like to do a cleanup detail here at Squadron 5. The carpets are very dirty. Everything's dusty and ugly, and so I'd like to do a cleanup duty.
And like a spring cleaning
I like kind of like a spring cleaning and clean everything.
early. It's really-
So I'll buy some 409, some Windex, and some paper towels, and I need your help to get everything cleaned up. So
Do you have a vacuum?
we do.
Oh,
It's right there. So that would be nice. Unfortunately, I was a little embarrassed when we had our scanner school. People were pointing out all the dirty carpet and things, and I just didn't have time to fix it. So now we do. So let's get together as a squadron and do a little bit of cleaning, if you don't mind. It's all you guys' squadron too. It's not just mine. So. And for that, I don't think I have anything else. XBN, you want to go ahead and take the
All right.
podium?
Yep, absolutely. All right, so how's everyone doing tonight? Good?
Wonderful.
Awesome, okay. We're gonna just take this off there. Okay, so tonight, what we're gonna be basically covering for aerospace education tonight is basically 2 things. One is the Jaeger exam, and then also the history, a little bit of air power, and then also just to talk a little briefly about the National Day of Remembrance that NASA also has as well. They actually wanted me to cover that part with you guys this week. So headquarters did, so that's why I've kind of threw that in there, but it doesn't really relate to the rest of the lesson plan that I have for tonight. But basically the objectives, which is really tiny there, you can't really, oh, there you go, is to understand the Jaeger exam and air power, the history of air power, and then also understand the parts of the Jaeger exam, okay, right there. And we're gonna cover, how do you take the exam, which is, going to online learning and e-services. And then I also prepared a PowerPoint as well, very brief PowerPoint, because we're only gonna cover just the history of air power, which is just the part 1 of the Jaeger exam. There's other parts to it. So what I kind of wanted to do was in the next coming months is, kind of build on that, and then we'll do space exploration and other areas as well, the other parts. So that way everybody's prepared, and then either to take the exam, or it could just be a refresher. Okay, we all sometimes need refreshers as well. And then, we don't have too many people here tonight, okay? That's okay, but I did prepare a little study guide in case you guys wanted to start studying it or just refresh your memory about the Jaeger exam. I did send it to your emails, so feel free to just take a look at that, when you have time from month to month. Yes?
How many have taken the exam already? 1, 2.
Is this the
Oh,
book?
me, 3.
Three.
Is this the book we use?
Yes, Journey, yeah, well, actually, that's an older one.
I think Mike's taking the
Yeah,
exam
you
too,
use that
right?
one.
Long time ago.
Yeah, so
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's revision 3 or 4. 4 is current, but I think the test was on 3, or revision 3, I think.
Yeah, there's 100 questions. There's 100 questions, but it's open book. Yeah. Okay. So, and then, but we'll see how far we get, because since we have less people, we might go a little faster here, okay? So let me just get back to this part here. Okay. So NASA's darkest hours. So this is the PowerPoint that they wanted me to share, because this coming Thursday, believe it or not, is actually a National Day of Remembrance for the 3 most catastrophic events that happened in NASA. Does anybody recall one of the 3?
Columbia?
Okay.
Apollo 1.
Apollo 1, yeah, 1967, very good. Anyone else?
The other space shuttle.
Challenger.
Yes, okay, very good, very good. So now, there were actual other moments where astronauts have died also, I do want to clarify that, this isn't the only time. But this is like the worst of the worst, where all of them died at one point. So that's why they have that. And they actually have a memorial, a mirror kind of like system at the Kennedy Space Center as well. So you can visit that if you're ever over there.
What was the Apollo where the 3 astronauts burned to death?
That was Apollo 1.
Yeah,
Apollo
that's
1.
1967, yeah. And that was, yes. So NASA Day of Remembrance, so it's next week, and it's a total of 17 deaths that unfortunately occurred, and so we'll honor and remember their memories tonight, and also on Thursday especially. So Apollo 1, like you had mentioned, was the first mission of the new Apollo program, and basically the main thing was to get to the moon and come back. However, though, there were a lot of little issues that kind of happened. There were some studies that were done afterwards that they found out that some of the equipment wasn't working too well, and those kinds of things. And like every story, right, happens. You find out about stuff after. So there was Lieutenant Colonel Edward II, United States Air Force. He was the first American to walk in space, but not a lot of people know that. The Lieutenant Commander Roger Chaffee was the first person, was the first flight into space also. Okay, and so some of the events that led up to it, basically the final test was called the plugs out test, and it would have the spacecraft sealed and running on its own power. There were communication delays, causing Grissom to bark out how do you expect us to talk to the moon when we can't even talk to each other? So they were having a lot of communication problems. Referencing talking to Kennedy Space Center Mission Control. There was also a sour odor coming through the environmental system, which was a 100% oxygen system. So the frustration levels were really high, with all of them, as the test was going on for hours. And then that's the one that basically exploded. So there was a fire, and it was really sad because they just really died. But a lot of people say that it was like a quick, kind of thing. It wasn't like prolonged, but it's still bad. The fire was so intense that it ruptured the hull of the spacecraft. They do say that the astronauts quickly perished, and Lieutenant Colonel White, who sat center couch, was found trying to turn the hatch latching system with Grissom assisting. While America had never experienced something like this before, there was determination to fix the problems, and they were trying to figure out, okay, what really happened. And there was also this even a bigger push now, because now it made national news to really land on the moon. So people really wanted, okay, we got to do it. We got to land on the moon.
So did they tell you exactly what caused it?
No.
The Waka panel is, from what I understand, so the B1, I worked on that for a while, and when I was talking to the engineer with some of the theory of operation that I had written about it, he had to correct me, and then he gave me this story about how this panel was in that Apollo 1, and they had to reroute. They figured it out, the sparks, when you push a switch or doing a switch, you're having contact, and so they took that out of the capsule.
And that's what caused it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Spark. A spark and 100% oxygen doesn't go well.
Yeah, with the 100% oxygen. So White, Grissom, and Chaffee, Apollo 1. This was the picture after that. There was also the Challenger. This one occurred in the 80s. I believe it was 1986. And this one had the famous teacher. Well, she became really famous on there. And so one of the things that they were trying to basically do at the time was NASA kind of went in, ups and downs, like everything does, right? Sometimes it gets very popular, sometimes it doesn't get as popular. So it wasn't as popular at the time. And so what they started to do was create this teacher program, where it was like they could have like a teacher, teach lessons in space, and it kind of sparked some interest, and it made more national news. And eventually the goal was to have more teachers up there, and that's kind of what they wanted to do. So I just kind of mention it. So the missions were not considered newsworthy before 1986. So to help draw the interest back into the space program, they announced the Educator in Space. That's what it was called, program. And so the teacher would be teaching from space, while teachers on the ground would add to the lessons, and students would learn. And then after a lengthy search, the educator was announced, and it was Krista, I think it's McAuliffe, okay, would fly. And then her lessons were based on early U.S. pioneers following their expeditions across America. And then all of a sudden, America was really interested in space again. So what basically kind of happened was on January 20, it was really cold in Florida at the time, and it was kind of not normal for that. But on the 26th of January, it was really, really like freezing. And so they decided to postpone it. And the 27th would have been a better day, which would have been the next day. But NASA wanted to still have it on the 28th. And so, however, it turned out that the 28th was also very cold too. And there were reports that were found afterwards of other individual staff members actually saying that it was too cold, that they shouldn't have launched, and those kinds of things. So the temps were cold on the 28th, as the ice teams that checked the orbiter saw icicles hanging from the shuttle stack. The solid rocket boosters were also made of 4 segments. So this was really interesting, I found too. And each segment had rubber O-rings that were placed between the segments. But remember, rubber does not do well, right, with cold and freezing temperatures. and you know, you can even just put a rubber band in the freezer and then take it out and see what happens. So that's basically what happened, is that the O-rings with the great pressure buildup basically fell apart during the launch. So while the solid rocket booster company placed frantic calls, so they found this out later, like every scenario, right? To not launch due to the cold, the NASA management decided to launch anyway.
Yeah, process called groupthink.
So is that very typical in these kinds of situations?
In high pressure, high financial situations, yeah, there's a peer pressure from the group to tap down dissenters.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like I believe there was that big oil spill. Gosh, which one was it?
The Exxon?
No,
No.
you're thinking the platform.
Yes, that one.
Deep Horizons.
Yeah, Deep Horizons. Yeah, where there was that, where the management really wanted to push it, but they shouldn't have,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's basically what he's saying. Yeah, it's crazy how that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a lot of pressure. So these were the individuals: Lieutenant Colonel Dick Scobie, United States Air Force Commander Michael Smith, Lieutenant Colonel Ellison Onizuka, Dr. Ron McNair, Dr. Judy Resnick, Mr. Greg Jarvis, and Krista McCullough.
McAuliffe, yeah.
You probably have a family member with that name, huh?
No,
Or you just remember.
I was working a news department. I actually have original AP teletype
What?
of the first stories of that coming across the wire.
So you were in the news department back then? Oh wow. Oh. Yeah, pretty cool. Then-
It's like I keep saying, you never know who you're gonna be talking to.
Yeah, you never know who's in here, right? Yeah, it's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. Yeah, so then these were the pictures. So I guess all of the aerospace lessons that are kind of taking place. Oops, sorry about that. Flick to my phone. They're all like sharing the same one right here. All right, so okay. And then there was the 2003 one, which was the Columbia. This was the space shuttle program that was doing well. The International Space Station was nearly completed, and NASA was basically doing science. It was the Space Shuttle Columbia was the first shuttle. It was the only one that could not dock. And then on the STS-107's flight, it was to orbit the Earth doing science research. The external tank, the orange tank, was insulated in foam. In the history of the Space Shuttle program, there was always a concern of the foam falling off the tank during launch. Think of the tank as a large thermos bottle. The foam was to keep the liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen cold during launch. These two liquids fueled the shuttle's main engines. So on the day of the launch, while the shuttle's past had chunks of foam that fell off the tank, none did extensive damage. It launched on the 1st of February 2003. On this day, a suitcase-sized piece of foam struck the reinforced carbon leading edge of the wing, and then it caused a hole. Keep in mind that the shuttle has incredible thrust, vibration, and acceleration at launch, as the flight had no way to dock. So this one was really sad. The crew was they basically were up there, they completed all the research, and there was really no way for them to come back. The STS-107 completed all their scientific research for the mission. Unknowing was to be their fate. And I think it was like 17 minutes before they landed that's when
Fell apart.
When it fell apart, basically.
Yeah.
So that was kind of sad. And the flight crew consisted of Lieutenant Colonel Rick Husband. Never seen that as a last name, but Commander Willie McCool, Dr. Michael Anderson, Dr. Laurel Clark, Dr. Dave Brown, Dr. Kalpana Shala, and then Mr. Elon Ramon. Oh, okay, and then here was another slide. The STS-107 was on final descent, headed for the landing facility at Kennedy Space Center. Sorry, it was 16 minutes, not 17 minutes. From landing, the orbiter broke apart over Texas. All astronauts were lost. The pieces recovered resemble at a Kennedy Space Center hangar. While the foam issue was an ongoing problem, procedures were put in place to monitor the foam problems. And these were the individuals. So this is like it was really bad because it was pretty much the entire crew. Okay.
Is that the Challenger group?
No, the Challenger
Oh,
was
that's
the
Columbia.
80s one.
Sorry.
Oops, sorry. Counting it. Darkest hours. So, if you go to the Kennedy Space Center, actually, you can see this. There's a space mirror display, and it's on a space mirror they call it. So it's on display there. And while all other astronauts, so this is important to know. Like, remember how I mentioned in the beginning there were other astronauts that died too, in other situations. These are the three main incidents that caused the National Day of Remembrance for NASA. All right, so let me get back to where I was going here. Okay, so what I wanted to share with you guys is how to get to take the Jaeger test, okay, or the Jaeger exam. So there's a couple ways to do it. If you have your favorites, that's also very helpful as well, because you can add, oh, you can't see my finger there, but where it says favorite apps on the bottom, you could add online learning there, okay? And then from there, you can always just click on that, and then it can take you to your
There's
test.
a pointer right there on the podium. Little metal. Yeah, pull it apart.
Oh, okay.
This is
well,
what we used
that
before
doesn't-
lasers.
Okay, I was trying to push it, I was thinking it's a laser.
Actually, lasers don't work on big screens. They get absorbed and you can't see them.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's one right over there if you want to try.
Somehow I knew.
Okay, that is pretty funny. Okay, so you should be able to go, so I'll just kind of guide you. You click basically where it says menu on the top left, and then it gives you this little slot of choices, and then you're going to click where underneath where it says logistics. I can zoom in here. Under logistics is online learning. You can click that. You can zoom out, and then you're going to click learning management system. So you're going to click menu for the people that are online. You click menu, then you're going to click online learning, and then you're going to click learning management system. And then you're going to click go to axes. Okay, right there. I wish it'd be a little, somehow maybe later on they'll make it not so many clicks to get to things, right? But
Well, you can actually do.
well, once
put
you have
in
it on
the-
favorites.
Put it in as a favorite.
Yeah, eventually, yeah, you could. Okay, so let me just go there. And then here in the filter or in the search, you can go ahead and just type Jaeger exam, and then you should be able to find it there. I think it's in the course catalog. Actually, if you click on course catalog, and then I'm going to zoom out here. Just a little bit there. Okay, you should be able to find it here. I did see it there, so it is there, and you click on it. It's an open book. It's 100 questions, so it does take a while. And then one of the great resources that you can also use is, if you go back here, I should have clicked make portal.
When you click on it, doesn't it have a link to the book itself?
No, not that I found.
No?
No.
Doesn't it have reference text?
No, but what you can do is, let me go here, because you should still have access to this. If you click on aerospace education, just as a senior member, you're able to kind of look at some of these resources here. You're not able to really request things like kits and those kinds of things, but you can get the aerospace education downloads and resources. Because I remember even before I was an aerospace education officer, I was able to go in there and download these. So then when you download, when you click on that, you're gonna look for the Journey of Flight. It should be in here. There it is, Aerospace Journey of Flight. And it could be second or third edition. There might be a third edition somewhere in here. But you're gonna click that book, and then you can, there's a lot of, it's basically a textbook. And you can read it and, you know, and go through that. Another way too is you can Google, you know, some of the questions too, you know, and then you can study that way. The other way also to study is to use a study guide. So the study guide that I ended up sending out basically relates to the 6 parts of the Jaeger exam. So just go through that study guide, and hopefully if we have time today, we'll do that a little bit as well, okay? Okay, any questions on that? No? No questions on that? Okay. So only 3 people have taken it right now so far. I'm assuming maybe some people online as well, and then maybe some more folks too. But the main goal is to get a lot of people to take the exam because you know, that's part of our regulations.
The main goal is 100% in the squadron.
Yes, yes.
We
And so-
kind of compete against other squadrons to see, you know.
Mm-hmm. And which takes me to this before I put the YouTube video. Let me see if I can plug this in quick. There we go. So like I mentioned, it does have 6 parts. The Jaeger exam, you know, the rich history of the air power, which we're gonna cover tonight a little bit, the principles of flight and navigation, the aerospace community, the air environment, rockets, and space. And then there's the testing. Okay, so hopefully after these next 6 months, through the study guide, through these lessons as well, and some of the resources I give you guys, you'll be able to pass the Jaeger exam as well, or just have that refreshment there. Okay. Okay. So CAP members are obligated to involve themselves in aerospace education. So some may wonder why? Well, because it's a regulation that we have. We're required to be informed on aerospace developments. That's why when we had that previous presentation about a month and a half ago, I mentioned that, the latest developments that happened. Also speak out on aerospace matters at appropriate formal occasions and during informal daily contacts. Share aerospace knowledge and experiences with other CAP members and the general public too. So it's not just the AEO, okay? Also it's everybody too. The aerospace education program for senior members includes the Jaeger test. So they do want us to have the Jaeger test passed. The aerospace education management skills development, okay, which is, I'll go over that in a bit. The aerospace education leadership requirements, that means you can either be an AEO or you can be one of the leaders, you know, in the squadron. Because they want you to be one of the leaders, so then that way, or hold a position, so then that way you're more involved in what's going on. Individual aerospace continuing education. There's also an AEO school as well. And then aerospace education outreach as well. So like I mentioned, the Jaeger tests, 100% untimed exam. The Charles E. Chuck Jaeger Aerospace Education Achievement Award, you actually get an award once you pass the Jaeger exam. And then it shows as like a badge. So when you go to your online learning, you can actually see that as a badge. And it's approximately 8 hours or 3 evenings equivalent to that. But people finish it a lot faster than that, I think. So, and then again, it's a study-based text of the aerospace, the journey of flight. So the aerospace education management skills development, basically it's a specialty track. So you go through the specialty track, there's the 22 tracks available, and it ranges from personnel to drug reduction officer to aerospace education officer. So that's one way to kind of get involved in that. Okay, and I'm just gonna go real quick on these because I want to get to the main part. Actually, let me just skip these part. Okay, so introduction to air power. So just a little bit about with the Jaeger exam, the first part is air power and the history of air power. So it's gonna talk about how China, from 4,000 years ago, you know, really started the flying process. They invented the kite, you know, 100 BC, gunpowder, 900 AD. There's a section about Leonardo da Vinci as well, and how, you know, he sketched certain flight designs and flying machines, and he also sketched the first parachute and helicopter, you know, of how it would look like. And then, yeah, so, okay, so there's that. Also, the lighter than air, so balloons. So it all kind of started from there, from balloons, and then it went to, I have a hard time saying this, but it's dirigibles? Dirigibles?
Mhm.
You know, it's like if you watch, if you've ever seen Indiana Jones, you know, those big, it looks like a balloon, but it can be actually steered because it has an engine in it. Yeah.
Zeppelin?
Mhm.
The Zeppelin?
Mhm.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And actually, oh, here's a picture. The dirigible, it's a lighter than aircraft that can be propelled and steered. And so, yeah, there's the Zeppelin right there. He built and flew the world's first rigid dirigible. So it's right there. And then also it talks a little bit about the Wright brothers as well. So you can also use this PowerPoint, which I sent out as well, as kind of as a base for your study guide as well too. Okay. So the Wright brothers, they were the first to achieve the controlled, sustained, and powered heavier than air flight. They learned from previous pioneers in observing birds in flight, so that's kind of how that started. And then they utilized gas-powered engine, and then they built gliders as well. And then in December 17, 1903, they had the first powered Flight 120, 12 seconds at, and I guess it was at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Okay. Now, one of the things that that they do talk about in the first part is that there was basically three main things to air power history. And one is, like, it started out like as an infancy or childhood, right? So from 1909 to 1919, it was the childhood adolescence part, you know, where flight's kind of starting to take place and air power and those things. And then we get to more where it's like adulthood, you know, later on after World War II as well. So in this phase, from 1904 to 1919, you know, we have the Wright brothers, we have the aviation games, we have Europe. So with the Wright brothers, you know, they got poor press, no enthusiasm, no government interest from until Teddy Roosevelt. All right, and then the aviation games. Let me actually go here in Europe. Let's skip to this one. Okay. World War I also took place during this time. And it's important to also know that during World War I, airplanes were not as important at the time. A lot of it was trench, you know, warfare at the time. So the Germans had dirigibles as bombers, though, filled with hydrogen, and they had developed those, and they were winning in that sense, you know, with that. But it wasn't as important during that time. Also, General Billy Mitchell recognized that air service should be separate from Army service, so that was very important. And he recognized that the airplane is could be an offensive weapon, and we could go after certain targets in certain bases and things like that, because they were losing a lot of people, you know, in the fronts. Then you have the Golden Age, which is from 1919 to 1939, okay, which is kind of like the young adulthood age. And so this was U.S. aviation after World War I. The U.S. had built 15,000 airplanes during war. The U.S. front line had 750 combat aircraft, 800 pilots. But remember, they weren't in World War II yet, so it was like right before that time. And then, okay, let me skip over here, Billy Mitchell and air power. Air power could strike industrial targets, that's what Billy Mitchell was saying, attack troop supply routes, shorten war, and he stressed the importance of air power in strategic warfare. Okay, I wanted to skip right over here. However, the biggest thing though, the biggest lesson that we've kind of learned from a lot of this though, before I go on to the next part, is that there were a lot of losses. Okay, so basically, 20 million people, basically died, a lot of innocent people, and because of that. So, at the end, you want to try to just avoid war, right? I mean, that's the biggest thing, just try to avoid war as much as possible. During this time also that when air power went to war, Germany had terrible losses in World War I from the trench warfare. They focused on small to medium-sized aircraft. And then during this time in 1940, Germany advanced and declared war on Great Britain. And then they also declared war on Russia too. And that also caused an issue because now they had war on 3 fronts, right? 3 fronts, and that's one of the reasons why they think that, they lost, because, he just got so, Hitler got so, his ego got so big that, he wanted to also take over Russia too, and so, anyways, so the Axis invaded Greece and Russia. Russia used heavy defenses, including women pilots for combat sorties. And then the Battle of Britain, August 1940. Germany did not have long-range bombers, and Britain used radar as well. And then Britain also won by having the right aircraft for battle too. Okay, as we enter World War II, we all know that on December 7, 1941 was the Pearl Harbor attack. And it was the main purpose that the Japanese wanted to do was to cripple our fleet. And, they kind of did that, but we still had a lot more power. The Allied strategy was defensive to offensive, recapture the territory occupied by Germany and Japan. So any of the countries that those countries had occupied, we wanted to take those countries back. And then basically ultimately force Germany and Japan to surrender. And the European campaign had priority over the Pacific, and then the focus was on strategic bombing. And then some of the lessons that we also learned in North Africa, because remember Germany had controlled North Africa, was to centralize the control of the air forces, gain air superiority, attack the airfields and the aircraft, just like the Japanese did when they attacked Pearl Harbor. And then close ground support is also needed. And then, right here. And then this last part here, air power goes to war here. The U.S. declared war on Germany on December 11, 1941. The 8th Air Force formed, and they invaded Normandy, and then Germany surrendered in 1945, May 7, 1945. But some lessons that were really learned from this whole air power, the history of air power, is that the airplane became very prominent, very powerful, and became the weapon of choice. 20 million people were killed, about 4 million civilians, and in warfare, no one really wins or loses. A lot of lives are lost, and so the biggest thing is, just to prevent it as much as possible. Okay, and then these were just some of the attacks and some of the war, battles that kind of happened in the Pacific. Okay. So I wanted to play this really quick here because I'm running out of time here. So I'm going to play this part. And I think the volume should be up, but I'm not sure. Because I think after this PowerPoint, this video gives like a little brief. It's only 5 minutes. It's only 5 minutes, but it gives you like a little
It's a great question today that
snapshot.
we ponder. Was it worth it?
Volume's right there on the, right there on top of that book, right there.
Yeah, I think it's good.
Just in case you need
There's
it.
a couple of things to remember about air power before we begin in earnest. One is that there was an enormous transformation between its inaugural appearance in 1914 in World War I, when pilots in biplanes shot revolvers at each other. In less than 30 years, about 25 years, 24 years, at the outbreak in September 1st of 1939 in World War II, we had monoplanes and the speeds had increased from 100 miles an hour to nearly 300, and people were firing about 700 to 800 shots per minute on machine guns, sometimes right through the propeller, sometimes on the wings. And they were carrying bomb loads, in the case of fighter bombers, of 500 to 1,000 pounds, and bombers even far greater. So there was a miraculous transformation in the role of air power. And that created, or architects of air power, so to speak, in the European countries and in the United States as well. Billy Mitchell, Duet, Weaver in Germany. And they were so enthralled by this new weapon that they made a series of astounding predictions, so much that Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin in the late 1930s said in despair that the bomber will always get through. And it was almost as if assets at sea, navies, and assets on the ground, infantry, were going to be secondary or even irrelevant. The war would take place up in the air. The problem with that is nobody lives up in the air, nobody eats in the air, nobody can fly. We don't have wings. So what you're doing is transferring labor and capital from the ground up into the air, and there has to be a purpose for that. And the purpose had to be either air superiority or air supremacy. And by that I mean your air forces had to beat the other person's air forces for the prime reason that they could then direct their assets to where things really mattered on the ground, taking cities or territory, or killing people or capturing them on the ground. If you couldn't do that and you only achieved air parity, then both sides were sort of wasting their time in an irrelevant theater. So the purpose was to build more planes and train better pilots to destroy the enemy's air assets, or at least weaken them so you had air superiority. And then the holy grail was air supremacy. That meant that you could put your assets up in the air, they could fly over the enemy's territory, destroy his cities or his armies on the ground, and they would be invulnerable because you had destroyed the enemy's ability to fight back in the air. And that was pretty much the theory of air power in World War II. It's a great question today that we ponder, was it worth it? The people say it didn't work, it was 80,000 people weren't worth it. We lost over 5,000 bomber planes. We spent 40% of our military budget, and yet German industrial production kept going. The defenders of air power said, well, we had to make the necessary investments. We lost men and material learning how to fly in the proper formation, how to have the proper fighter, the proper fighter tactics, the proper radar. But once we learned that, we destroyed Germany's industrial production, and it's not quite accurate to say it continued to increase in terms of vehicle or aircraft production, because Germany really wasn't mobilized until Albert Speer, the czar of German industry, took control of the economy in late 1943. Once he did that, we were destroying the increase in production, and Speer's planned economy was not sustainable. So even though it increased, it did not increase at the rate that it would otherwise have had we not been bombing around the clock. The United States lost about 400,000 dead through accidents, disease, and combat. Britain lost a little bit fewer, and yet defeated a far more formidable enemy than was true in World War I. In other words, Germany, Japan, and Italy were far more powerful allies and enemies than had been the imperial German army of World War I. And how did they do that? And how did they lose only about 2 to 3% of their entire military forces? And the answer was sea power and air power did one thing. They avoided the need to land in Europe at the very beginning of 1940, 41 in the case of British, and the United States in 42 or 43 in Japan. In other words, we did not do what we did in 1917 in the case of America and the British in 1914. We did not bleed white our ground forces to take the enemy capital and knock the enemy out of the war. We bombed them into submission and therefore precluded an invasion of Japan entirely, and we precluded an invasion of Europe until we were ready to do it in June 1944. So the ultimate verdict, I think, on air power was it was very costly. It did not work too well in 41, 42, and 43, but the Allies gained the lessons and achieved air superiority and eventually air supremacy that by 1944, 1945, it saved thousands of lives, and it's one of the greatest successes of World War II.
All right, okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, so I kind of wanted to do what's kind of called like an idea wave here. And basically what we do with this is, I want you to kind of think about any idea. You can look at the study guide that I sent you. So I sent it to you via email. So just take a moment just to take a look at that. You don't have to, but you could. Another way you can also do it is just consider any of the topics, like the Wright brothers, the dirigible. You can any topic from the video, from World War I to World War II, anything like that. And all I want you to do is just to talk with the person sitting next to you, and just to think about maybe 3 facts. Okay, just to consider 3 facts that you know about, and then discuss each one, and then add 2 things to it. So maybe, like, for example, let's say Christopher is my partner, then I talk to him and I say, well, did you know such and such, about Pearl Harbor, or something like that, or actually, or a personal experience. I visited Pearl Harbor as well. I got to see this, and that the oil still leaks till this day. And then he adds on another thing as well. So he just shares one experience or one fact as well. And then what we're going to do is we're going to all I'm going to call on just a couple people just to share out. It actually works a lot better when there's a lot more people, but it's okay. We'll just do what we can.
Remember, we have the COVID rules. We have to stay 5 feet apart.
Oh, is that why everybody's? Nah,
That's right.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. So anyway, so if you could just look to the person in front of you or to the person right behind you, and that person could just be your partner. And again, just think of a couple things, just a couple facts from tonight's lesson or topics that you want to share with your partner. Remember, you're just sharing with your partner, and then when I say, hey, can you share out, what you and your partner discussed, then you just share out what you guys discussed, so then that way other people learn other facts as well. So that's the whole point of it, okay? All right, okay, so we'll take about 45 seconds to a minute. So if you could just share with your partner just 3 things about these topics. See here. Dress right.
The Doolittle raid.
Yeah,
I can share
Doolittle
some
raid.
No, I'm not saying.
One
I just have this chronic cough.
Japan,
Yeah,
flew over, landed in China.
Yep. Most of them didn't make it back. They had to land in China. They took off from carriers. They practiced that for quite a while. Those are the facts. Personal, I know a guy at work where I think it was his grandfather was in that raid. One of the members.
It's still oil.
I remember one of the impressive things was the communication, being able to encrypt it, the encryption machine. That was how they communicated to even bomb Pearl Harbor, and so on. They were able to decrypt it.
Oh, the Enigma machine.
Yeah, yeah.
3 years,
That was pretty
putting a
cool.
lot of resources and getting help from Britain and the United States. In fact, a lot of Soviet American fighters.
Okay.
Oh, see, I'm trying to think of something
T-39
that
was one of
unique
the
that I know or
and,
share.
they used some of the British fighters. I don't recall exact models.
Yeah, I don't really have a whole lot of.
But Soviets.
I'm a loss to describe something here. The only thing I can really think of is the strange association between the size of the solid rocket boosters and horses. So back in the Roman ages, the roads were built to be 2 horses wide to accommodate carriages and the chariots. Well, that was conveyed into train track sizes in the United States. You know, that the road sizes eventually led into roads, and that led to train tracks. That became the standard size. Well, in shipping the solid rocket boosters, they had to go through a tunnel, and that tunnel was built around the size of the railway, of course. So essentially, the size of the space shuttle solid rocket boosters were limited in diameter to the size of that tunnel, which was governed by the size of 2 horses side by side to pull a chariot. That's how, you know, one standard worked its way from Roman times all the way through, had an impact on modern times.
Wouldn't have fit into a 747. The solid booster.
You know, they probably could have, but there's probably a cost benefit analysis done somewhere.
And the German industry was already.
Yeah, they used to ship the B-2 parts up to the final assembly on these 2 gigantic trailers that actually folded up, and so like on the road they could.
Okay, well, a lot of great discussions going on. Yeah, it was only going to be a minute, but you guys were like all into it, so that's pretty good. All right, so just really quick, I wanted to see if we can maybe just share out a few ideas. This is called the Idea Wave. Just any topic that maybe you guys discuss with your partner. Just any topic. It could even be for the National Day of Remembrance, World War I, World War II, anything that you want to share, anything interesting. How about?
I'll volunteer.
Okay.
Stuff I didn't even share. I saw.
He knows a lot about it.
I was living in Texas when the Challenger burned out, or sorry, when the Columbia burned out. So
Oh, wow.
I saw the fragments falling. So,
Wow, so you literally saw the fragments falling, and then you were a news reporter.
I worked in a newsroom. Not the same thing.
Okay, well, close. Yeah, wow, that's so cool. Wow, that's awesome. And then you were also sharing something about World War I too?
I'm a collector of useless facts. So, yeah, so one thing we talk about, the dirigibles, they didn't just drop bombs because they're expensive to maintain and they're carrying an explosive device and a giant explosive device. So the Germans were pretty smart and they know how to kill people very well. They would just mill a bunch of nails and float over the trench and drop thousands of nails.
Each one became a projectile.
So yeah, if it didn't outright kill you, you would get injured, you get gangrene in the trenches and die. And
Wow.
yeah, they were pretty awesome.
I didn't know that. That's a
Did
really
they
interesting
sharpen
fact.
both sides of the nail so they didn't have a head on them?
It didn't matter.
It didn't matter, just,
Yeah.
And this
it
was
just
during
made
World War
carnage,
I?
huh?
During World War I.
One injured soldier takes out 5 additional soldiers helping them.
Yep.
Dead soldiers are better off because then people keep fighting, but if they're injured, they need to be
Yeah.
carried to, which takes more people from the fight, so it's pretty smart for
And
everything.
the thing they learned in World War II was shoot medics.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like,
Great. Well, thank you for sharing, Chris. How about Mike? Did you?
I don't have anything.
No, you don't have anything. Okay, all right. How about Andre?
A quick fact about World War II, and you mentioned in your presentation about women pilots.
Yes.
The
In Russia.
squadrons of women pilots were operating small biplanes,
Oh, the night witches,
Port
right?
2. It's called Port 2. 2 women were on each airplane. They
Wow.
were extremely slow, poorly equipped, and the one woman was a pilot, the other one was dropping hand bombs on trenches.
Really?
And they were flying at night, and then the poor visibility extremely low.
Wow.
For that, Germans called these squadrons night witches.
Oh, wow.
They were
Wow.
scared to death of them.
Yeah, they were pretty effective.
The night witches.
I've heard that story, that's a cool
I
story.
think I dated a couple.
That's a really
Yeah.
good story. I never heard that. Yeah.
They were young, beautiful women. Most of them were average
Young,
20,
beautiful
22-year-old.
Wow. And then one of them was dropping bombs, hand
One
bombs.
was operating the airplane, one was the
And one
pilot.
was operating the
And
airplane.
the average time from starting the pilot program to going to the front was approximately 3 months.
Mhm.
So in 3 months, they learn how to fly the airplane and go to the.
And you
flight.
gotta also think about, this was back in the 1940s where, you know, most women probably weren't doing those kinds of things.
In
Yeah,
Soviet
you can tell.
Union, women were
Yeah.
equal
I mean, it was
to men
odd, probably.
since beginning of revolution. So
But what was
yeah.
their safety program like?
But, you know, I
I
mean,
struggle
like
to have
compared
student pilots
to
fly over
America,
drones.
you know, compared to America, you
In
know,
Russia,
England,
plane
and-
flies you.
you know, a lot of those countries probably like seeing it as like, what, you know, but, yeah, but, you know, Russia did whatever they could,
There were plenty of women snipers too. You know,
wow, to
so-
defend themselves.
So whatever it takes to kill as many Germans as possible.
Yeah, yeah, well, you know, there's I've heard this many, many times, when someone invades your country, you know, it's like it's a different thing than you going to
The
another.
motivation is
Yeah.
different.
Yes,
Two of
yes.
my grandfathers were killed in action. They all volunteered.
Wow.
Like every family has more than one person
Mm-hmm.
fighting the war and at least one not coming back.
And at least not, yeah. But yeah, there definitely is a difference, is when they do invade your country, then you're gonna really defend, you know, big time. But-
I found a giant omission while doing the Jaegers. I did it recently.
Oh, you did the Jaeger exam
I did
too?
it recently. The big omission is they missed the fact that the CAP actually dropped bombs on Japanese submarines.
That's
They,
true.
they didn't mention it anywhere in the World War II history, and I was like, that and the fact that we're older than the Air Force. Like, they didn't mention those two main facts of the CAP. So
Yeah, good
They're
point.
trying to play nice with it.
Yeah, yeah.
You can't outshine everybody now.
We showed up.
Good point.
After all, Air Force funds the CEP.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, how about in the back over there? I saw some, I heard some interesting discussions, I think. Just any?
Really, the only thing I could come up with was one of my business courses, I remember hearing that the size of the solid rocket boosters on the shuttle were limited in size, and that delineates from essentially the size of Roman roads, which were defined by the size of two horses side by side. That became the standard for the size of the road. That, of course, stayed the standard for many years and through automobiles, carriages, automobiles, even to
I think
trains.
that's still the NATO standard.
Mhm.
I think so.
That's pretty
So
cool.
one of the tunnels that the solid rocket boosters had to travel through was, of course, limited in size.
Mhm.
So that was the dimensional limits of the solid rocket boosters. And
That's-
all traces back its history to the size of two horses side by side.
Two horses side by side, that's what the dimensions are. That's pretty cool. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So, well,
Both directions?
Side by side.
yeah, cool, awesome. Well, thanks, guys. We shared quite a bit tonight. It's already pretty much 8, but just normally when you have more people, I would have done more, but, hey, we covered a lot tonight. So just to kind of go over what we did, the objectives were to understand the Jaeger exam and how to access it. Also, a little bit of history of the air power, and I think we accomplished that. We went over the e-services and how to access that, and then our PowerPoint, the PowerPoint that I shared, and then also a YouTube video too. Okay. All right, any questions?
Well executed lesson plan.
Well, thank you very much. Good job. HB always does a great job on our.
Yeah, I didn't have
education.
time. Well, actually, I have a Kahoot, but we don't have time. But yeah, there's a Kahoot. Like normally, I'll do like a little Kahoot. It's like a game, So yeah.
No, he does a great job. I really like to have him here, so.
No problem.
We don't have a whole lot going on, other than that. Yes, sir.
Was Terry able to bring up Zelda? It's pretty windy.
We've had problems because of the wind,
Yeah.
and apparently there's a dead battery today, so, but we are scheduled to go get it Thursday. Right? So, anyway, and I think that Terry's in communication with the guys that are doing the onboarding, and he's in communication with all the other guys that are being qualified to fly. So, we won't have Zelda back for probably 5 or 6 weeks. I mean, excuse me, we won't have 437 back until 5 or 6 weeks. Zelda is coming here Thursday, so
Hopefully.
we may have to park it outside for a few weeks until they move 437 to a maintenance hangar. So, anything else? Anybody, go around the room, anybody? Anybody, got anything? Got any questions? Nothing? Okay.
I'll just read the comments from chat. Looks like Terry Pratt. Who else is watching? Tim Peterson. I'm here. Terry Pratt. Tim, check your cap email. That's it. Awesome news. Looking forward to it. Congratulations. Terry Pratt probably at least an $1,800 value. So that's what chat had.
Battery?
Oh.
Battery? Right?
Yeah, not $1,800.
About,
That sounds about right for a battery.
Well, I don't think they're,
Normal price
well,
times like
I don't
5.
think they're that much, but right now.
I could see in the
Right now with the shortage
$500.
of everything everywhere,
Oh,
and
it's
the,
everywhere.
and the extorted prices, that
Mhm.
might not be too far off.
Certified aircraft.
I remember paying about, I don't know, $300 or $400 for my 24 volt for my Skymaster, but that was, what, about 10 years ago now, so.
Last year it costed me on my Uni about $400.
$400, yeah, okay. Any other questions? Meeting adjourned, let's go home. So, if you have any questions for me, let me know. Also, the new guys, dues are due,
That's what I was.
whenever you have them,